Hello, humans. Welcome to the Freedom Fridays podcast with Michele Leona, a space for people who desire to walk in freedom. So I know I always say I'm so excited about this episode, but today I'm super excited because we have our first guest. Okay, so quick backstory. We, from the beginning, have been talking about, I want to make sure we're talking about things that push y'all into freedom. And there's one area for me that I've been praying for God to help me break free from an area of fear, and that's motherhood. So before marriage, I would always answer the question, how many kids do you want? Or do you want kids? Like, yeah, whatever God does, however many kids God gives me, I'll receive it, right? What happened was the pandemic came, I got married, and a turn in my life happened. I started to feel a level of anxiety and fear that I didn't have before when it came to motherhood. And a lot was going on in our world, especially being in and from New York. It looked a little different for us, and the fear of motherhood just started to increase. And so I started talking to moms and asking them questions because I'm inquisitive, but also because I really wanted to break down the stigma and the taboo of we can't share our struggles with one another. And I started to find out that a lot of moms were not passed down information as well. And in our communities, we weren't sharing with one another. And so I'm like, okay, a lot of people feel the same way. Why not have these conversations on a larger platform? And so you can be in the room with us. You're here at our home, at our space. Just enjoy. Please feel welcome and be as vulnerable as you possibly can as you listen to this conversation. So let me introduce our guest for today. Tasha is a mom. She's a sister. She's a wife. She's an auntie. She's a cousin. All the roles that she plays as a woman of God. Tasha and her husband lead the Saving Your Marriage Before It Starts, aka SYMBIS, classes at our church. They are also the heads of the Marriage and Family Hub for groups. So this is someone that you want to listen to. Tune in. Let's get into it. I have questions, but it's about to be real conversational. All right. Hi, Tasha.
Hi, Michelle.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you for inviting me.
Okay, so, I've been saying I'm excited this whole time since we spoke and everything. There's just so much in you, and I hope that we can get to the majority of it.
For sure. I'm excited as well.
Okay, so first thing I want to ask is, what was your perspective of motherhood before becoming a mom, and then what was it after? Because sometimes we have media and people in our environment kind of help us form our ideas, but then things change when it's your reality.
Yeah.
So what was it for you?
So I'm a little different than a lot of mothers out there. My perspective started when I was a little girl, and it never came from media. I loved, of course, Claire Huxtable, but that was never my perception. My grandmother was my perception of motherhood.
Yeah.
My grandmother was just all around amazing. Like, she was the best cook in the world. She was the best nurturer. Everybody in the neighborhood respected and loved her. She was respected and loved in her church. She was stern but meek at the same time. So she never raised her voice, you know what I mean? But there was nothing motherly, no motherly problem that she couldn't solve.
Oh, that's good.
The strength that she exuded, it was just, we just never, it didn't mean that she didn't feel things. It didn't mean that she didn't go through things or have any emotion or even emotional breakdowns. It was just, she handled her business. And she came up in a time when things were not favorable. She came up, she was from Mississippi.
Wow.
She was born in 1913. So we know what those times were like for her.
Yeah.
And then when she didn't remain married, she was married twice. And she and my grandfather did not remain married. But through it all, she was still able to maintain her peace. She was still able to be there for all her children, male and female. And then she was there with her, her grandchildren. And so that was my perception. I wanted to be, people asked me as a little girl, what do you want to be when you grow up? What do you want to be when you grow up? My answer was always a wife and a mother.
Wow.
Which was weird, right? But that is what I wanted. Everybody else was talking about doctors, lawyers, police.
Right.
I wanted to be a wife and a mother, and I do not know where that came from.
Yeah.
But that's what I wanted.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Yeah.
So it was exemplified to you.
Yeah.
And was she, I don't know if you mentioned this, but was she like a believer? Did she
Absolutely.
disciple others and stuff like
She
that?
did. The biggest, like the most fond memories, well, no, that's not true, but it's one of the most fond memories we have. My grandmother was not a woman who preached and taught the Bible, but you didn't see her live it. When we would
Okay.
show up, announced or unannounced, to her home,
Mm-hmm.
she was sitting at her dining room table with her Bible open.
Wow.
And if her TV was on, back then, it was Billy Graham. You know, it was, so she had that on the TV and she was actually reading. And we would go, my mother would drop us off for her to babysit and we would go and play and do whatever we were doing. She was actually sitting there reading and studying. And,
That's good.
you know, she was a praying woman. And so the people in the neighborhood knew that about her and her brother who she lived with. And they would come and study with them sometimes.
Yeah.
And so she was everything that a woman of God should be behind closed doors.
Amen.
And so, yeah, she was definitely a believer.
That's good.
Definitely a believer. She taught me how to forgive. Like
That's
literally,
big.
she taught me how to forgive. Because there were things that we went through that were unforgivable.
Yeah.
And she would not let us act out. She didn't let my parents act out. She didn't let, you know, my uncles act out.
Mm-hmm.
We had to forgive.
And was your mom younger? Because
No.
if your grandma had such a... Okay.
No, my mother had me when she was 26.
Oh, okay.
So she was younger than I was when I, you know, had kids, but she wasn't a teen mother or, you know, early. She was an adult.
But you remember your grandma having that like pivotal part in exemplifying what a mom was like. Okay.
Yeah. She was an older grandmother. You know, she had my mother when she was 26 as well. So by the time we came, you know, she was getting up in age.
Mm-hmm. Especially for that time.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So she, you know, we saw her, you know, as she was getting older, but yes, she definitely, that was my hero. My mother too, but my grandmother she was my everything.
That's beautiful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so speaking of generations, I want to jump into something that when we were talking, we were talking about how, you know, with each generation, we learn new things.
Yes.
You know, you have from newspapers to the internet to social media to now AI. You could ask AI whatever, and it just does all the research for you.
Yeah.
And there's kind of a lack of grace sometimes we were talking about for the previous generation.
Yeah.
So can you share a little bit more about what you were talking about when it comes to giving grace?
Absolutely. It grieves me a lot when I think about the current generation, you know, the Gen Z and who's the ones that are after, is it Alpha or?
Yes.
But mainly the millennials and Gen Z. When I hear them talking a lot about, you know, their parents or the generation before them messed them up and they didn't give them a lot. Well, generationally, every generation has access to more education. They have access to more information than the generation before them.
Yeah.
And so what the Gen Zs and the millennials may have picked up, one, the internet came out during my generation, Gen X. So what they have access to, we did not. We had libraries, encyclopedias, we had meetings. You had to physically go get information, or you had to learn it on your own, or you had to ask questions.
Yeah.
And so there's no fault of Gen X and the baby boomers and everybody that came before us for not equipping Gen Z and the later generations in the way that they feel like they should, because they just didn't have the information. Each generation can only get what was given to them, and what was given was what the previous generation was given. And so there's room for grace for the previous generation. We should actually honor them for what we did get from them. And then we should feed back, be grateful, and then feed back what we're learning and take what we're learning, the new information that we're getting now, and say, hey, I forgive you for what you weren't able to do, because I know you didn't really know.
Yeah.
You didn't have the resources that we have. So what I feel like I might be lacking or missing, I forgive you for. You know what I mean? There should be grace, because you can only get, and not to mention, we also have to remember that the generations before us had traumas of their own.
Yeah.
And the traumas were dealt with in different ways.
Right.
Secrets were big in previous generations where now we're tell-alls. We put
Yeah.
everything on the internet. We tell everything.
Yeah.
And a lot of information was not shared, because that's the
100%.
way that it was. And
Yeah.
so again, we have to give grace, but also we have to be mindful of teaching that once you're an adult, it's your responsibility
Right.
to become who you need to be. No matter what you got from they can only give you so much.
Right.
It's just like when you go to college or when you go to school, they teach you the basics. They teach you the skeletal parts of what you need to know for a career that you're going into, for whatever. But it's up to you as you implement what you learn, and as you get different scenarios and stuff from whatever it is you're going into, it's up to you to really learn that thing for yourself.
Facts.
It's the same thing with life,
with
parenthood, marriage. You know
That's
what I mean?
good.
You can only get the bare bones, and then it's up to you to make life.
Yeah,
what
put
it
the
needs to be.
tissues on it, put the meat on it, put the
Absolutely.
fat on it. Yeah,
Absolutely.
layer some skin.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I don't know.
All of it.
Yeah,
All of it.
yeah.
Yeah.
That's so good.
Yeah.
And also, I just want to say, because I could hear the person listening, it doesn't mean to excuse
No.
the abuses
No,
or the traumas
no,
of
no.
the previous generation.
Correct.
But the things that they weren't able to pour into you,
Absolutely.
their lack of knowledge,
Absolutely,
should be given
but
grace
know the
and
difference.
forgiveness. Yes.
Know the difference, because again, the internet has given us a lot of big therapy words.
Right.
We are thriving on narcissism, abuse, and trauma. Everything wasn't abuse, trauma, or narcissism. Some stuff was just stuff you didn't like hearing.
Right.
So in some cases, we just have to grow up. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But when it was really abuse,
Yes.
which, we just recently learned in our Freedom Conference, and abuse is taking something and using it in a way it was not intended. So if that is not what happened, you just were upset because it didn't go your way, or they weren't able to give or willing to give you what you wanted. And abuse is to take you, your mind, your body, and use it for their own good in a way that it's not intended.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so we have to know the difference.
Yeah.
We have to know the difference.
And in knowing the difference, then you can offer up what you need to offer. Like,
absolutely.
an abuse, I can offer, God, I need healing in this area.
Absolutely.
Versus, Lord, help me get over
Absolutely.
myself so that I can give grace to this person.
Absolutely. And in the cases of abuses and traumas, it is okay to confront the abuser or the person that issued the trauma and ask for an explanation or express what it did to you. And once you do that, now I'm talking to believers. Unbelievers handle that a little differently, but for a believer, after you've done that, because what you're doing when you do that is you're freeing yourself, you're releasing it instead of compressing it and holding it and internalizing it, which can damage you.
Yeah.
Mind, body, and spirit.
Yes.
It can damage you. But when you give it to that person, give them an opportunity to be accountable for it.
Right.
Don't have an expectation. Just give it to them and let God do the other work.
Yeah.
And then you make a choice to forgive. And then we're not going to keep talking about it. Now let's grow up and live life the way God intended you to live in spite of your traumas and abuses.
That's good.
Yeah.
Okay. So another thing that you mentioned too when we talked was how sometimes, like, people put on you a standard for how you should be as a mom. You shouldn't do too much, and too much means different things in different cultures. But like, one of the things you're like, if you want to be protective, be protective. Like, this is my only chance to guard them in a certain way, you know. And obviously God will help me have balance.
Absolutely.
But can you talk to what you mean?
Absolutely. So I struggled for a little while because I felt that certain people that were somewhat close to my husband and I felt like they judged me a little bit. I was the mom who, first of all, I prayed and offered my children to the Lord while they were in my womb.
Okay.
And I felt a charge to protect them. Now, I can admit that I may have been somewhat overprotective. I can admit that, but I'm okay with it.
Okay.
And you'll hear more about my story at some point. But there were some things that I went through in my life that led me to believe that you can't turn a blind eye to everything and that any and everything is possible.
Yeah.
And so that where you have the power to protect, you do that.
Yeah.
You just don't haphazardly release your children to anybody and just hope for the best until something happens, and now you got to help them heal.
Yeah.
So my children were not the children that were spending the night at people's houses. Everybody could not babysit my children. If we did anything, if my husband and I did anything, it had to be family friendly.
Okay.
My children had to be able to go. And they were well-behaved children. I did not allow teenagers to babysit my children. You know what I mean? I did not. And it was because they were into things that we didn't necessarily do in our time or whatever.
Yeah.
And I was very, very aware of spiritual energy,
Okay.
if I can say that. Well, first of all, my older son, Mackie, he sensed things spiritually. If your spirit wasn't right, you couldn't touch him. He would go berserk. If he sensed that your spirit was he wouldn't even let you touch him. And so I protected that.
Okay.
And then if I didn't know the people that you had around you, if I didn't know who would be in and out of your house, because I may trust you, but I don't trust who you trust because I don't know them.
Right.
And so we were very strict about who could actually handle our children outside of the school system.
That's good.
And so some people kind of made me feel a little,
you're doing too much.
You're doing too much. You gotta, you can't just expect stuff to happen. I don't expect it, but where I can prevent it, I will. And when the Lord releases me to release them, I will.
Okay.
So we have to be okay with protecting our children, because where some people can say, well, now you're overprotecting them. You can't shelter them from the world. You can't keep them in a box. I never did that. They still experienced things. But then you have a child who you trusted them with the wrong people and something happened, and then they feel like you did not protect them.
Yeah.
So either way, you're not going to be perfect.
Right.
But where you have the power to prevent some things, be okay with that.
Yeah.
Raise your children, be prayerful and in tune with Holy Spirit, and raise your children the way the Lord guides you to raise your children, and be okay with it.
And be okay with it.
Be okay with it.
And stand on that.
Stand on it. They're yours.
Yeah.
He trusted you with them, not the people who have something to say.
That's good.
So,
that's good. They were literally chosen for you.
For you.
Exactly. Because God knows how your personality. So He knows, He knows your experiences.
For sure.
He knows exactly what Tasha would do in the case of blah, blah, blah.
For sure.
So it makes sense that if He's choosing this human to come from your body,
absolutely, He
knows exactly how you're going to lead things.
Absolutely.
He just wants you to partner with Him, though, as He guides you, as you guide them. That's really good.
Sure. Yeah.
That's really good. So there shouldn't be a shame
absolutely
in wanting to protect.
Yeah. If you don't allow your children to do sleepovers and slumber parties, that's perfectly okay. There are a lot of people who never did those, and they turned out to be absolutely great humans.
Yep.
They're not missing out on anything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there are people that did them and they ended up fine, and there are people that did them and they have war stories.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Trauma that they're still trying to overcome later on in life.
Yeah.
Yeah. So no shame.
No shame.
No shame. Okay. So we talked about how your perspective was before. How has it changed? Because you've had some time now as a mom. You've had some time. How has it changed from before actually being a mom to
okay, so it's still the most beautiful experience I've ever had. It's like it's the thing about myself that I'm most proud of.
Wow. That's big.
Because I have some great boys. Now, where I can say it's a little different is that I was so excited about the fact that I had boys and not girls. And I'm thinking, I don't have to deal with the emotions. I don't have to deal with that is a lie. Okay. Evidence has concluded that is a lie. Boys are still hormonal as they change from adolescence to, oh my goodness. And then I was so gung-ho about being a mother that I didn't take into account the fear that came with it.
Okay.
I did not take into account the hesitance that came with it. Right. I did not take into account the inability to always care for them in the way that they need. You're not always going to be able to kiss every boo-boo and make it better.
Yeah.
And so the moments of feeling helpless are very, very, it's very difficult.
Yeah.
But one thing I can say, God knew what he was doing when he intended for mother and father to be a married unit. Because what I have with my husband when it comes to parenting, and I know a lot of people don't have that testimony. I'm not oblivious to that. I'm not naive to that. But God intended for us to be a unit.
Yeah.
And to raise a family together. And because he intended it, the idea was a perfect idea. And so where I fall short, Jason steps in. Listen,
Woo!
I thank the Lord for letting me choose the right one to procreate with. And it's so simple, like things like when they get sick, I can handle pain. I can handle them bleeding. But when they're sick and nauseous and like they're just, I can't take that. Jason steps up. He does that part. So, but when they're hurting mentally and we don't know what to do, we kind of bounce off of each other. I don't have to do that by myself. And I know that there are a lot of mothers, kudos to them. I pray that God gives them all the strength in the world to get through it because they have to do it by themselves.
Yeah.
I don't know what I would do if I had to do it by myself.
Yeah.
I don't. But where I fall short, Jason steps in. Where he falls short, I step in. So my perspective, I got what I wanted, but I got some of what I did not want. I did not know what I was signing up for.
Yeah.
Now, if I could speak to the fear piece is the more and more you do start releasing them into the world and the world starts introducing its ideals and its stuff.
Yeah.
You know that you taught your children the right way. You know, you taught them the best that you could.
Yeah.
But ultimately, as the Lord is allowing their brains to develop, their minds to develop, he is preparing them for free will just like we have.
Yeah.
That is scary to me. Because the one thing I don't want just my husband and me to make it
right
to heaven.
Right.
You know what I mean? To be with the Lord for all eternity. I need not one. I need both of my boys to be at the gates with me.
Yeah.
Right. You know what I mean? And so when you start hearing the things that the world is introducing to them, it gets difficult. And then when they start getting quiet, when they start going quiet and you don't know what's on their mind, you don't know what they're thinking, their moods start to change. They don't want to talk to you.
Yeah.
That can be scary because you don't know what's taking over or filling in those gaps. But and the Lord you can't force it. But the Lord reminds you that this is their process.
Yeah.
We went through it.
Facts.
They've got to go through it.
Yeah.
And the great thing about God is he sends me reminders that what we've taught is still in there. They'll come out randomly and just start spitting wisdom. And you'll be like, I didn't know that was in there. I didn't know that was in there. But every stage, when they go to kindergarten, when you first take them to daycare, after you've been with them during your maternity leave, that's scary.
Yeah.
Then when they first go to real school, kindergarten, that's scary. Then they get through elementary school and now they got to go with the big kids to middle school. That's scary. Then they go to high school. That is scary.
Yeah.
Now they got to leave my house and go to college. I'm terrified.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so I wasn't prepared for the fear. I wasn't prepared for the worry. But like you and I talked about before, it's not for me to continue worrying. I have to trust the prayers that I prayed before they got here.
Yeah.
I've got to trust the God that I prayed to keep them because I gave them to him first before they got into the earth.
Yeah.
And so when I continue to live in the fear and worry, I'm telling God, I don't trust that you answered the prayers that I prayed. They belong to him. I've got to trust that he's got them no matter what.
Yeah.
That can be hard, but there's also comfort in it. You know what I mean? And so I wasn't prepared for any of that. But again, motherhood is the one thing that I can say I'm proud of myself for.
Yeah.
I will toot my own horn, pat my own self on the back and say, I'm a pretty darn good mom, you know? And I try my hardest to give them what they need and some of what they want, but for the most part, what they need. And so, it hasn't changed much, but fear has definitely become a big part of my life.
Especially if you're so excited about something.
Yeah.
You're not
Yeah.
thinking about all those other things.
And I didn't have the maturity to even think about those things.
Right.
You know what I mean? It was since I was a little girl. It's what I wanted.
Yeah.
And I think part of it too, and I think this is important for people to know, I think it was coming from a place of emptiness that I had too. Because I lived in a situation where my sisters knew exactly who they were.
Okay.
Mom and dad. I did not.
Okay.
I knew mom. I did not know dad. I was raised with my sister's dad, but he wasn't mine.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And because he was her blood, there was a certain level of closeness that they had.
Yeah.
And there was a certain level of favor that she had with him. And my other sister, who's like my sister cousin, my mom was raising hers, her baby brother's daughter. Her mom got shot and killed when we were 3 and 4 years old. We were a year apart.
Wow.
And so he could not raise her on his own. He was terrified. So my mother said, okay, I'll step in. Well, when my uncle wanted to come get his baby, he would come get her. She had her dad. Even though she lived with us, she had her dad. He wasn't like gone and we never saw him.
Right.
She would come back. She had a bunch of brand new stuff. He loved on her.
Oh.
She had that. There was no place for me to go. There was nobody to come spoil me except for my grandmother. You know what I mean? And so there was a place of loving somebody that I know will love me completely and totally. You know what I mean? There was just this missing thing that made me yearn to have my own and to make sure they had everything they needed, knew who their father was, all this thing. I think that's where it started.
Okay.
I think that's where my desperation to have a child and to do right by that child and make sure that that baby had everything they need, including their dad.
Yeah.
I think that's where it started.
Yeah. Like I want them to have the best experience or whatever my mind can think of is best. I want to create that environment for them.
And I was determined to do it.
Yeah. And you're doing it.
I'm trying. I'm trying to do it without overcompensating because that's a big thing.
Yeah.
I'm trying to do it without overcompensating.
And thank God that you see it though.
Yeah.
Like, because some people go through life.
Yeah.
And it's not until their deathbed that they finally look over things.
Yeah.
Like, you know, I could have done this. I could have done that differently.
Yeah.
But you're actually taking the moment, or God is arresting you.
Yeah.
And be like, daughter, I need you to look at this.
For sure. Look
at this. Yep. This is, it's cool.
Yeah.
But we could adjust this a little bit here and there.
Yeah.
Okay. So one of the things I definitely wanted to ask, because it's one of my most curious areas, practically, medically, what was your going to hospital or being treated, and what was that experience like? And the reason why I'm thinking of that is I told you one of my areas of fear was the increasing rates of specifically Black mothers dying during birth or just after birth, or you know, complications, and a lot of them not being listened to or not having advocates. So not that everyone has that experience, but what was your experience?
So I can say that my experience wasn't so bad. Well, I mean, Jason is my husband. So
okay.
It's important to have a strong advocate with you.
Yes.
Because even to the part of, so I'll say this, my intention was to go as far as I could naturally.
Oh.
Because I technically, now I wasn't in the way of getting a doula and all that. I just really just wanted to do it with no pain meds.
Okay.
Well, that didn't last long after I got there. I was like, oh, call the people. Call the people. Give me something immediately. And so they did, but Jason did have to step in.
Okay.
Because the anesthesiologist that was trying to put him an epidural kept missing. And you know that can damage you.
Yes. Because we're talking about, it's your spine, right?
And so they're trying to do this and you're having contractions at the same time. But here's the thing. God knows what he's doing. Listen, so as a woman, your mind starts saying, which pain would you prefer? A needle or these contractions?
Okay.
So you can suffer through the needle.
Okay.
You understand what I'm saying?
And the needle's bigger though, right?
I don't look at it. Don't look at it. Choose your battles. Choose your battles. I didn't look at it. But what I had to lean over on Jason and he's holding me, right? I'm leaning over on him. And the guy is like, oh, and he's pulling the thing back out. And he has to go in again.
Mm.
Jason pushed me back a little bit. He stood up. He said, look, now my wife is in pain. He said, you got one more time. He said, if you miss this time, it's going to be trouble. And we're going to get somebody else in here.
Okay.
Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Because he's tinkering around and he can cause damage. He hits the wrong area. He can damage me for life. And so.
And he's supposed to be a specialist though.
Yeah, but he could not get it. He did it at least 3, 4, 5 times.
Oh no.
So I say all that to say, when you have a strong advocate with you to speak up for you when you cannot, it helps. And make sure that you have your directives with your advocate before it even starts. Because at some points, you won't always be able to communicate what's happening.
Right.
And so you can always say to the person that's with you, hey, listen, this is it. I need you to do X, Y, and Z. Mm-hmm. If I go through this, I need you to tell them this.
Okay.
Make sure that your doctor knows, the doctor that you've been seeing throughout your pregnancy knows what is absolutely not happening, what's off limits and what you're good with. Make sure you have a good relationship. If you find during your prenatal care that you are not clicking with your doctor, change doctors and don't feel a way about it.
That's good.
Do it ahead of time.
Yeah.
Right? If you're feeling that they're not listening to you, change during the prenatal phase.
Okay.
So that you can feel comfortable with somebody who is really hearing you.
Yeah.
And make sure you have that advocate. That helps. And just keep talking until they listen. It's your body, it's your baby.
Right. That should be on the t-shirt.
It's your body, your baby. For sure.
But then, well, people may take it the wrong way.
Yeah,
Never mind. Take it off the t-shirt.
Take it off the t-shirt. Cancel that or you get canceled.
You know, depending on.
Yeah, before you get canceled. But yeah, other than that, other than the epidural experience, they were very good to me. Okay. And I actually didn't even have an OB. I had a nurse practitioner.
Interesting.
That delivered my babies. And it was great.
I mean, I hear sometimes they're just the difference is the degree.
Yeah, that's it.
Like sometimes they all know the same thing.
They do. So. And so I had my husband and my sister. Oh. So either way, I was gonna be good.
That's good.
So
having the right support around you, people that are willing to,
for sure,
because you can have support and then y'all all timid, so no one's
that part.
Up.
You better get a bulldog.
That's scary. Yeah,
you better bring a pit bull with you.
Someone that's willing to. I'm not afraid of looking any type of way by standing up.
Yeah, and when you're doing your birthing plan, like a lot of people now do birthing plans where this is what I'm planning for my birthing day. Okay. Have your people on hand and have an agreement with them that this is how things are going to go. Okay. You know what I mean? Yeah. Go from there.
So you didn't have any other complications like during actual pregnancy?
I did. What did.
Was that like?
I carried my children very, very low, so I was in a lot of pain with beforehand. Okay. When I carried Mackie, I carried both of them very low, but I carried him through the summer. And so on top of the pain, I was extremely swollen. And so it would be to where I would sit and he would move and I could feel him in my bottom region. And then I think it's important to also mention, now this is not stuff to be fearful. It's discomfort. Right. Baby, if we can go through periods and cramps, we can go through, it's not the same thing, but it's, I'm not talking about the birthing. I'm talking about going through the pregnancy and they're growing and your body is adjusting and all that stuff. You can go through that. Because here's the thing, the love that you have for the person growing inside of you supersedes, like you're so in love, you're willing to sacrifice your body.
So that's already happening.
It happens. It's like happening naturally. The moment that you find out that you are with child.
Really?
It shifts. You fall in love with the fact that there is a person.
What? From
the moment the pregnancy test says positive, unless you're a person who absolutely does not want children.
Right.
But the growth and the changes happen so gradually. It's almost like when you went from childhood to puberty. Mm-hmm. You weren't born with breasts, but they started to bud and you didn't feel it all, but you felt some things, right? Mm-hmm. Your body started preparing to be able to have children. So you had a menstrual cycle. Yeah. You started, it felt gross, you were embarrassed. And then all of a sudden it was a little painful. And then it was like, okay, I'm used to it.
Now I know how to deal with it.
It's you don't get pregnant and all of a sudden there's this big human just occupying space and making you
Right.
uncomfortable. It's a gradual thing.
Okay.
And so by the time you get to the end of the pregnancy, yes, you're uncomfortable. And at that point, you're ready for whatever is to come, because now you just want to evict them.
Okay.
You know what I mean? So it's okay. You're not terrified of the fact that it's like, okay, they got medicine for that.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm good. He needs to come out. She needs to come out.
Yeah.
And so mentally you're preparing for it. But again, you are so in love. And then you have ultrasounds, and then they move and you see an elbow go across your belly. It's a little alienish.
Weird.
It's weird and
Yep.
alienish, but at the same time, you know it's them, or they're balled up in a ball and you can feel their little tush right here, and you have your hand there.
Wow.
And then they kick your hand or something like that. You're
my
so
gosh.
in love to where it's like all the strange things, you welcome it.
So this communication's already happening.
We used to read to them. Jason would read books to them while they were in there, and they would react.
Yeah. And y'all are music people. Did you do music
Oh,
too?
yeah. All the music and yeah. And with Mackie, I was still singing with Mackie. Jason was playing and I was singing until it just was too much. And yeah, they came out. Tristan's a drummer. Mackie used to be. Now he can't keep a beat to save his life.
That's interesting.
Oh, it's very interesting. But yeah, they reacted to things.
Wow.
They reacted to things. If I would press my belly just to mess with them, I would press my belly in one spot, and you'll see him.
That's wild.
I'll do it again, and he would play with me. They would play with me.
Wow.
Then we have an ultrasound picture where it looks like Mackie is going like this. Like he's giving a thumbs up. So it's like all these different things become part of the experience.
Yeah.
And you're so in love. You're like, Lord, okay, well, whatever. And so then you get there, they have medications. If it's too overwhelming, they can make you comfortable. And you just have to be able to communicate what you're feeling.
Okay.
Trust the process.
Amen.
Trust the process. I'm telling you,
Thank
you can
you
do
for
all
sharing
things
that.
through Christ who strengthens you.
Yeah, literally.
Yeah.
It has to be him.
Absolutely.
And so speaking of that, there are just two scriptures that came to mind when I was thinking about my fear. To like one, perfect love casts out all fear. Right. And that's in 1 John 4:18. And then the other one I was sharing was Proverbs 3:5-6, where it says, trust in the Lord with all your heart, lean not on your own understanding.
Yeah.
In all your ways, acknowledge
All
him
of
and
them.
he will direct your paths.
All
and
of them.
that's in every season of life. And so even in motherhood, you know, you really have to trust. And that's where I was telling you, I'm at a place now where before I'm like, let's not, let's put a pause.
Yeah.
Not a no.
Yeah.
But let's put a pause. Because I wouldn't say no and because that's disrespectful to my Lord.
Yeah.
But
absolutely.
I was like, can we pause though? You know, you give me free will. So we can But I'm definitely in a place where I'm like, do I really trust you? And if I do, I know that you're sovereign even over this.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, everything that you give me is still yours. You know, I'm just stewarding over it. So that's helping me.
That's it.
And even some of the things you shared today actually helped me too. And just thinking of the fact that the communication starts so early on.
Yeah.
And so you don't feel disconnected. I know in some cases women do have.
So let's speak to that really fast.
Yeah.
There was with my second child. Again, fear stepped in. I started freaking out. Okay, so between Mackie and Tristan, I had 2 miscarriages.
Okay.
And so by the time I was pregnant with Tristan, I had told myself I'm not getting attached.
Okay.
Because I was just in case, because it hurt the first miscarriage, I did not know I was pregnant. So I didn't get the chance to get attached. And I was getting ready to go into surgery and they gave me a pregnancy test. And I was passing a lot of, I know TMI, but I was passing a lot of blood. And I thought I was having a long, heavy period.
Okay.
But I was passing and it just kept going. I want to say, I believe that I was pregnant with twins. The reason why is because after you have a miscarriage and you pass, your numbers go down. Okay. Mine would not go down. They wouldn't, because I believe there was something still there. Okay. And I was still passing. And so I had passed a mass again, probably like a week later, and my numbers went down. But I was getting ready to go for gallbladder surgery when I found that out. Because they
deep.
ask you before surgery, are you pregnant? Any
Okay.
chances? And I told them, I said, well, I don't think so because I'm bleeding heavy. But they were like, let's test just to see.
That's good.
My numbers were up. So the next time I was confirmed pregnant.
Mm-hmm.
I miscarried at church on Easter Sunday.
Oof. How far
And that
along
was
were you
one.
at that point?
I wasn't far at all.
Okay.
I had just found out, and I was actually due to go to the doctor to confirm at the doctor. The pregnancy test had confirmed, but I miscarried on Easter Sunday. And so by the time I got to the doctor, they confirmed that I was, and that my numbers were going down, but they weren't all the way down.
Mm-hmm.
And so by the time I got pregnant with Tristan, I was numb. I was just like, you know what? I'm not, because I had prayed, over the other one, and I still lost it. And I wanted my children to be 2 years apart.
Wow.
And Tristan, I got pregnant with Tristan like months after the last miscarriage. And so again, another fear. And so for the first 3, 4, 5 months of that pregnancy, I couldn't connect because I was afraid of losing them.
Wow.
And then I remember crying to my husband saying, I don't know if I can love this one the same because I don't feel the same. So I don't know, like, how, as much as I loved Mackie being my firstborn, how can I possibly give the same amount of love to another one? I felt like I was not going to be fair because I couldn't connect with Tristan immediately. And it wasn't until later in the pregnancy to where it clicked. It clicked. I had connected again. And then when I had him, it was just like, oh, look at my little, you know what I mean? And it was just, so it was different, but I was afraid. And then when I had him, I was like, oh my God, I love this little dude so much.
Yeah.
And my question was answered. How can you love one as much as the other? It comes. You can.
And if you're a reflection, like as in a parent of God, like as a parent for us, there's mad of us, right?
Yeah.
There's billions of us.
Some of us ain't worth 2 cents. And he loves
and he loves us
one.
the same. So you having 2 kids, you definitely, and he shows you that. And I hear a lot of people say that, like they see God more intimately as a father after they became parents. Because it's you get daily lessons.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. So daily chances to see how God sees you.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, there's so much more we could talk about, but time. So thank you so much for coming. I really enjoyed our conversation. Thank you for sharing your heart. Thank you for sharing your experiences. There's so much more. And I need to let y'all know that Tasha has some stuff coming up. I'll make sure I post her social handles and how you can find her in the description notes. So check those out. But stay tuned for whatever it is that God is going to pour out of this woman, because it is going to bless so many people. Well, beautiful humans, thank you for joining us for this amazing conversation today. I pray that you love purely, that you give generously, and live freely. Embrace forgiveness and walk in your God-given victory. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
Laters.